How's going guys, welcome to the channel. I'm back with another banger for you all. If you wants to see awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get into the video. In the lowest rings of hell, where the fires burned cold and the only currency was cruelty, a demon with no clan name and bright blue eyes was busy getting on everybody's nerves. His name was Naruto, and his most defining features, beyond his shocking blonde hair and the trio of whisker-like birthmarks on each cheek, were a loud mouth and an unshakable, almost infuriating, optimism. He was a low-caste demon, a scavenger in the sulfur pits, his only talent a preternatural resilience to the toxic fumes that made other demons wheeze. The other scavengers, grizzled creatures of shadow and horn, called him Whiskers and spat on the ground when he walked by. His blue eyes, they said, were the eyes of a fool or a liar. In hell, both were the same. Hey. Watch where you're stepping, you three-eyed toad. Naruto yelled, sidestepping a hulking demon whose back was a mass of pulsating boils. The creature just grunted, not deigning to even look at him. Naruto was used to it. He'd spent his entire, short life being an outcast. He had no memory of parents, no clan sigil branded on his soul. He was just Naruto. And he was determined to make a name for himself, even if it meant being the loudest, most annoying demon in the Ashfall District. One day, while he was trying to barter a particularly shiny chunk of obsidian for a ration of spoiled brimstone meat, a new figure wandered into the district. He was tall, with long white hair tied in a topknot and a pair of crimson markings on his face that looked like deliberate fashionable scars. He wore a simple unadorned kimono and carried a wooden staff, a stark contrast to the jagged iron and bone favored by most demons. He moved with a casual air that was completely out of place, like a predator strolling through a junkyard. The stranger's eyes, sharp and intelligent, swept the marketplace and landed directly on Naruto. A slow smile spread across his face. Well, now, he mused, his voice a low rumble. What have we here? Naruto, feeling a strange mix of defiance and curiosity, puffed out his chest. What's it to ya, old man? You lost. The man laughed, a full, booming sound that echoed off the Ashen cliffs. Lost? Not at all. I think I've finally found what I've been looking for. He approached Naruto, ignoring the wary glances of the other demons. My name is Jiraiya. And you, boy. You have a very interesting aura about you. Aura? I don't know about any aura, but I do know how to land a punch if you get too close. Naruto warned, clenching a fist. Jiraiya's grin only widened. Good. Spirit. You'll need it. Your blood. It's weak, almost dormant. But it's there. The blood of an overlord. That stopped Naruto short. Overlords were legends, figures of immense power who ruled the higher circles of hell. They were as far removed from a pit scavenger like him as the stars were from the mud. You're crazy. I'm just Naruto. No clan, no lineage. Exactly, Jiraiya said, his eyes gleaming. You're a blank slate. A rare thing. And I'm going to teach you how to write your own name on the fabric of this world. What do you say, kid? Want to learn how to make these other knuckle-draggers respect you? Under Jiraiya's tutelage, Naruto's life changed. The old sage, as he called himself, was eccentric and prone to disappearing for days, but when he was present, he was a font of knowledge. He taught Naruto not just how to fight, but how to channel the faint flickering energy within him, his demonic chakra. It was frustrating work. Naruto had more enthusiasm than control. His attempts at Jiraiya's techniques usually ended in explosions of black smoke and minor property damage. Focus, Naruto. You're trying to summon a fireball, not start a dust storm. Jiraiya would yell, ducking behind a rock as Naruto sent a shower of pebbles and grit in his direction. One afternoon, while attempting a particularly complex hand sign sequence meant to conjure a minor illusion, Naruto felt a different kind of energy surge. It wasn't fire or shadow. It was vast. A churning crimson power that felt ancient and angry. There was a puff of smoke, and instead of a clone of himself, a small orange creature with beady red eyes and tiny bat-like wings stood on the ground, coughing. What the? Naruto stared, dumbfounded. The creature looked up at him, its expression one of profound annoyance. About time, you knucklehead. Do you have any idea how cramped it is in that dimensional pocket? Jiraiya, who had been watching from a distance, burst out laughing. Well, I'll be damned. The brat actually did it. Did what? Who is this guy? Naruto poked the small creature with a finger. Kurama crossed his tiny arms and fixed Naruto with a stare that managed to be deeply unimpressed, despite the fact that he was roughly the size of a house cat. I am Kurama. And you idiot, are the one who summoned me. So you'd better take responsibility. From that day on, Kurama was a constant, sarcastic presence in Naruto's life. He was Naruto's familiar, a manifestation of the sliver of overlord power within him. He offered constant, unsolicited criticism. Your stance is terrible, that's the wrong incantation, moron, are you trying to attract attention or just give us all a headache? But he also provided a link to the power Naruto struggled to control. With Jiraiya's guidance and Kurama's grudging assistance, Naruto began to grow stronger. He learned to harness his chakra, his blue eyes often glowing with a faint inner light when he focused. The other scavengers started to watch him differently, their gazes shifting from contempt to a wary respect. He was no longer just Whiskers, the loud-mouthed runt. He was Naruto, the student of the wandering sage, the demon who could summon a fireball that actually hurt. The change culminated in a public challenge. A higher-ranked demon from a neighboring district, a bully named Zaku who loved to lord his status over the lower castes, decided to make an example of Naruto in the middle of the market. "This place stinks of failure," Zaku sneered, his voice amplified by the hollow tubes in his arms. "And you're the source of the stench, Whiskers." Naruto, older and more confident now, didn't back down. "At least I don't need a fancy pair of pipes to make myself feel big." Zaku's eyes narrowed. He raised his arms, and the air pressure around them suddenly dropped. "Let's see how tough you are when your lungs are collapsing." But before Zaku could fire his compressed air blast, Naruto moved. He wasn't thinking, just acting on instinct and months of brutal training. He felt the familiar heat of his chakra, but this time it was different. It was hotter, cleaner, and it surged through him like a tidal wave. A visible aura of golden red energy crackled around his body, his blue eyes blazing like twin sapphires caught in a forge. "Shadow clone jutsu," he roared. Instead of one or two, a dozen solid chakra-infused clones burst into existence around him. They didn't have the wispy, unstable look of his old attempts. These were real. Zaku's eyes widened in shock. He fired his blast, shredding through 3 clones, but the others were on him in an instant. They didn't use fancy techniques. They just used the brawling style Jiraiya had taught them, a relentless, overwhelming storm of fists and feet. Zaku, a demon who relied on a single powerful trick, was completely unprepared for the sheer, unadulterated aggression. He was quickly overwhelmed and left in a groaning heap in the dirt. The market was silent. Then, a slow cheer began to rise from the other low-caste demons. They had seen one of their own stand up to a superior and win. Naruto, breathing heavily, looked at his hands as the clones dispelled in puffs of smoke. The power had felt incredible, but also terrifying. It had been so easy. Too easy. He looked at Jiraiya, who was no longer smiling. The sage's expression was serious, his eyes fixed on Naruto with a newfound intensity. "The blood is waking up," he said quietly. "And now, the whole of hell will be watching to see what it does next." Naruto swallowed hard, the cheers of the crowd fading into the background. He had gotten what he wanted: respect. But as he looked at his trembling hands, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just opened a door to a much larger, and far more dangerous, world. The journey had only just begun. The legend of the Hellborn had its first bloody chapter. And Naruto, the loud-mouthed outcast, was only just starting to understand the cost of the name he was trying to make for himself. He wasn't just a demon anymore. He was a demon with a destiny, whether he wanted one or not. And in the pitiless heart of hell, destiny was rarely kind. But as he clenched his fist, the golden energy still crackling faintly round his knuckles, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to face it quietly. He was going to face it screaming. The upper rings of hell were everything the lower rings were not: polished, perfumed, and absolutely lethal in ways that didn't advertise themselves. The air here didn't reek of sulfur and despair. It smelled of intoxicatingly expensive alcohols, smoke from rare herbs, and the faint metallic tang of ambition. Towering spires of black glass and carved bone pierced the perpetually blood-red sky, each one a monument to some demon's ego. The streets were paved with smooth, obsidian-like stone, and the denizens weren't the scrawny, desperate scavengers Naruto was used to. They were sleek, powerful, and adorned in silks and leathers that probably cost more than an entire district back home. Jiraiya, for once, looked perfectly at ease. He strolled along with his hands in his sleeves, a serene smile on his face. "See? Not so bad, is it? A bit of culture. A change of pace from the muck and the mud." "It's too clean," Naruto grumbled, sticking close. His simple tunic and worn boots felt horribly out of place. He felt every aristocratic glance like a physical touch, each one dripping with condescension. "And everyone looks at me like I'm something they'd scrape off their boot." "That's because they're terrified," Jiraiya said with a low chuckle. "They can smell the power on you, kid. Raw, unrefined, but potent. It's like a wild animal in a jeweled cage. They don't know whether to gawk or run." Their destination was a grand coliseum, not for gladiatorial combat, but for the demon trials, an annual competition where young demons showcased their abilities to win patronage, resources, and prestige. It was, Jiraiya had explained, the perfect place for Naruto to test his mettle against his true peers. As they approached the soaring structure, a cacophony of noise washed over them. Vendors hawked enchanted trinkets, and demons of every shape and size jostled for position. It was in this chaos that Naruto first saw her. She was leaning against a pillar, completely detached from the crowd. A hellhound, with fur as white as bone and piercing red eyes. She wore a leather jacket over a dark crop top, and her expression was one of profound boredom mixed with a simmering anger that seemed to be directed at the entire world. She was talking to a lanky imp with a wide grin and a mismatched suit who was gesturing wildly with a glowing clipboard. "Looney, I'm telling ya, this is a prime gig. We get in, we cause a little distraction during the main event, and we grab the target while security is busy oohing and aahing at the fancy light shows. It's perfect," the imp said. Luna the Hellhound didn't even look at him. "It sounds stupid, Blitzo. And I'm not calling it Operation Awesome Heist. That's the dumbest name ever." Naruto was captivated. She wasn't looking down on him because he was from the lower rings. She was looking down on everyone. It was impressive. He started to wander towards them, a grin spreading across his face, his usual opening line already forming. "Hey there. You look like you're having even less fun than I am. Which is saying something." Luna slowly turned her head, her red eyes locking onto him. For a second, there was nothing. No flicker of interest, no annoyance, just a cold, empty stare. Then she turned back to Blitzo. "Is this a fan? Get rid of it." Blitzo finally noticed Naruto. "Oh, hey. A customer. Are you in need of some high-quality, bespoke assassination services? Or maybe a less-than-legal courier? We do it all. I'm Blitzo, the O is silent, and this is my surly, but incredibly effective, daughter." No, I just..." Naruto started, but the sheer force of Luna's disinterest was like a physical wall. He'd never been so completely shut down before. He found himself speechless, which was a first. Jiraiya clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Come on, kid. We have a trial to get to." He gave Blitzo a knowing nod. "Good luck with your gig." As they walked away, Naruto glanced back. Luna hadn't moved a muscle. Who was that?" "Trouble," Jiraiya said simply. "The kind you don't need right now. Focus." But Naruto couldn't focus. That look in her eyes. It was a challenge. A far more potent one than any bully in the pits. He filed her away in his mind. The white hellhound who saw through everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. The inside of the Colosseum was even more overwhelming. The central arena was a massive stage, and around it were private boxes for the high-born demons. In the largest one, draped in purple silks, a succubus was holding court. She was breathtaking, with pink skin, dark hair, and eyes that smoldered with a dangerous allure. The succubus in the purple box noticed him at almost exactly the same moment he noticed her, and the smile that crossed her face was the kind that came with terms and conditions buried in very small print. She leaned over the railing, her gaze locking onto Naruto with an unsettling intensity. This was Verasika Mayday, a star, a power, and a predator in her own right. She gave him a slow, deliberate wink that felt less like an invitation and more like a claim being staked. "Great," Naruto muttered. "More attention." The first competitor was called. A demon with wings of pure shadow and eyes like molten silver took the stage, conjuring illusions so real they made the crowd gasp. He was good. Polished. Trained. Naruto felt a familiar itch under his skin. The crowd was cheering, the judges were nodding, but it all felt so safe. So predictable. Before Jiraiya could stop him, Naruto vaulted over the railing and dropped into the arena. The shadow demon paused, his illusions flickering. The crowd fell silent. "Hey. That was pretty cool." Naruto called out, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "But you know what's even cooler? This." He didn't wait for a response. He just let the power flow. The golden red aura erupted around him, brighter and more intense than it had ever been in the pits. The shadow demon's eyes widened in shock as Naruto, moving faster than he should have been able to, closed the distance. He didn't use a complex technique. He just threw a single, straightforward punch, channeling every ounce of his chakra into it. The impact wasn't loud. It was a deep resonant thum that seemed to shake the very foundations of the Colosseum. The shadow demon was launched off his feet and slammed into the far wall, his illusions dissipating into harmless smoke. He didn't get up. The arena was utterly still. Then, a voice boomed from one of the highest boxes, a voice laced with fury and authority. "Who dares interrupt the trials?" The massive demon, his skin like cracked granite and his horns like twin obsidian towers, rose to his feet. He was a lord, one of the ruling class of this ring. His eyes burned with a cold, terrible rage as he pointed a clawed finger at Naruto. "You are an uninvited, low-born filth. You will be removed." Naruto, standing in the center of the arena with his fist still clenched, just grinned. The thrill of the fight, the shock on his opponent's face, the attention of the entire Colosseum, it was intoxicating. He was no longer just a scavenger from the Ashfall District. He was a storm that had blown into their perfect polished world and shattered their champion with a single blow. He looked up at the furious demon lord, then over at Verasika's box, where she was watching him with a look of predatory delight. He even spared a glance for the entrance, where he saw a flash of white fur. Luna was watching too, her expression unreadable. "Removed." Naruto shouted back, his voice brimming with cocky defiance. "You'll have to catch me first, you overgrown paperweight. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm just getting started." The crowd erupted. It was a mix of shock, outrage, and a sliver of something else excitement. In a world of rigid rules and ancient power structures, an unpredictable, loud-mouthed wildcard had just kicked over the table. The demon trials had just become a sideshow for the main event. And as the Lord's guards began to move, Naruto felt the familiar, wild energy surging through him. He had come here to make a name for himself. Mission accomplished. The fallout was going to be spectacular. The Colosseum, once a monument to order and spectacle, descended into beautiful, screaming chaos. The demon lord's guards, hulking brutes in gilded armor, charged towards Naruto. He didn't wait. He exploded into motion. The golden red aura around him wasn't just a show of power anymore, it was a weapon. He weaved between the guards, his movements a blur of instinct and Jiraiya's training. A punch here shattered a breastplate. The kick there sent a demon flying into the stands. He wasn't fighting. He was a pinball of pure unadulterated energy, leaving a trail of chaos in his wake. From her private box, Virasaka Mayday watched with a growing predatory smile. The other nobles were gasping in horror, their delicate sensibilities offended by this display of brutish, lower-ring power. Virasaka, however, saw something else. She saw potential. Raw, untamed, and deliciously defiant. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the blonde whirlwind of destruction. "Oh, I am going to have so much fun with him," she purred to herself. She raised a perfectly manicured hand, and a single glowing pink sigil appeared in the air before her. It pulsed once, and the guards nearest Naruto suddenly found their movement sluggish, their limbs heavy as if wading through tar. The distraction was all Naruto needed. Getting out of the Colosseum was less of an escape and more of a controlled disaster, which Naruto felt was a perfectly acceptable outcome given the circumstances. He and Jiraiya, who had calmly extracted himself from the chaos, found themselves in a shadowy alley a few blocks away, the sounds of enraged demons and shattering glass still echoing behind them. "Kid, I have to hand it to you," Jiraiya said, trying to catch his breath while still maintaining an air of detached amusement. "When you decide to make an impression, you don't mess around." "Yeah, well, they started it by being boring," Naruto retorted, the adrenaline still pumping through him. He was buzzing, his blue eyes alight with the thrill of it all. A soft dark chuckle echoed from the other end of the alley. Naruto spun, his fists up, ready for another fight. Instead, he saw Virasaka Mayday leaning against a wall, one leg crossed casually over the other. Her entourage was nowhere to be seen. She was alone, and the predatory glint in her eyes was now focused entirely on him. "Bravo, little Hazbin," she said, her voice a low, melodic hum. "That was the most interesting thing I've seen in a century. You turned that stuffy little competition into an actual show." Naruto felt a strange heat rise in his cheeks that had nothing to do with his chakra. He lowered his fists, suddenly very aware of how close she was. Thanks, I guess. You're the one from the box, right?" Her smile widened, a flash of perfect teeth. "Virasaka Mayday. And I know who you are, Naruto Uzumaki." The loud-mouthed wonder from the pits. She pushed off the wall and sauntered towards him, her movements impossibly graceful. "I have to say, I'm a fan of your work. It's so unrestrained." Jiraiya cleared his throat pointedly. "As flattered as the boy is, Miss Mayday, we should be moving along. The company you keep tends to attract the wrong kind of attention." Virasaka's eyes flicked to Jiraiya, a flicker of something ancient and knowing passing between them. "Oh, I know exactly what kind of attention I attract, old man. And so do you." She turned her gaze back to Naruto, her expression softening just a fraction. "Just remember, not all attention is bad. Some of it can be very rewarding." With that, she blew him a kiss that shimmered with pink energy before dissolving into the air. She turned and walked away, her hips swaying with a rhythm that was hypnotic. Naruto stood there, staring after her, completely dumbstruck. Did that just happen?" "Yep," Jiraiya said, clapping him on the shoulder. "And you do well to remember that a predator like that doesn't give compliments. She marks her prey. Now, let's get out of here before the rest of the zoo shows up." They didn't make it 10 feet before a new figure stepped out of the shadows. This one was smaller, with long flowing black hair and a dark elegant dress. She looked utterly out of place in the grimy alley. Her posture was rigid, her expression a mask of royal disdain. "You," she said, her voice cold and clipped. "You are the one who disrupted the proceedings." Naruto immediately recognized her. She was in the box with the demon lord who had wanted him removed. "Look, I was just..." "Silence," she commanded. Her eyes, a deep unsettling purple, narrowed. "You have insulted my father, Lord Stolas. You have made a mockery of our traditions. I am Octavia, his daughter, and I will be watching you. Do not think this is over." Her words were a formal threat, but Naruto thought he saw something else in her eyes, a flicker of curiosity, maybe even envy at the freedom he so brazenly displayed. Without another word, she turned and vanished into the night. "Geez, everyone's got a bone to pick with me today," Naruto muttered. But the final encounter was the one that threw him off balance the most. As they reached the main thoroughfare, preparing to blend into the retreating crowds, a figure detached itself from a nearby doorway. It was Luna. She was alone, her arms crossed, her expression as sullen as ever. For a moment, she just stared at him, her red eyes unreadable. Then, she spoke. That was stupid. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Naruto blinked. Thanks. I think. Don't get the wrong idea, she snapped, a hint of her usual irritation creeping in. You're still an idiot. But you made that pompous windbag look like a fool. So, whatever. She looked away, the faintest hint of a scowl on her face. Just don't expect me to save your ass next time. I'm not your friend. She shoved her hands in her pockets and stalked off into the night. Naruto watched her go, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. That was the longest conversation they'd ever had. By the third day after the Colosseum, Naruto had been ambushed twice, had a formal bounty placed on his head by a demon lord he had never actually spoken to, and was starting to think that making a name for yourself in the upper rings was a significantly more painful process than advertised. He was nursing a sore arm from a glancing blow by one of Stolla's enchanted spears when Jiraiya finally decided to fill him in on the specifics of his new reality. They were holed up in a rundown tavern on the very edge of the high-class district, the kind of place where the glasses were sticky and the patrons didn't ask questions. That wasn't just any demon lord you humiliated, kid, Jiraiya said, swirling the murky liquid in his cup. That was Lord Stolla's, a Gosha prince. His family is ancient, their power tied to the very stars. They don't take kindly to upstarts, especially ones who punch their prize protégés through a wall. Naruto groaned, resting his head on the table. So I'm basically public enemy number one for a whole family of space wizards. Great. Just what I needed. Precisely, Jiraiya said cheerfully. But it's not all bad. You've also caught the eye of people who matter. Verosika, for one. She doesn't waste her time on fodder. And your little performance has cemented your reputation. You're not just a pit scavenger anymore. You're a threat. An unknown quantity. That's a kind of power in itself. It feels more like a please stab me sign taped to my back, Naruto muttered. Kurama, perched on the table and nibbling on a discarded piece of bread, snorted in agreement. The old pervert's right, for once. You've poked the hornet's nest and now you're dancing around it with a flaming stick. It's only a matter of time before you get stung. The sting came later that night. They were moving through a quiet courtyard when the attack hit. It wasn't one or two guards this time. It was a coordinated strike. Demons with cloaks of shadow melted out of the darkness, their forms shifting and indistinct. They were Stolla's elite enforcers, and they moved with silent, deadly efficiency. Naruto was ready, but he wasn't ready for this. They were everywhere, their attacks coming from all sides, their forms blurring to avoid his blows. He managed to land a few hits, his golden aura flaring with each punch, but for every one he took down, two more seemed to take its place. He was overwhelmed, his energy flagging, a sharp pain lancing through his side from a blade that had gotten too close. Jiraiya was holding his own, his staff a blur of wood and steel as he wove through the attackers, but even he was being pushed back. This was a fight they couldn't win. Just as Naruto was about to be cornered, a new sound cut through the night, a wild whooping battle cry. A small whirlwind of a figure launched herself into the fray from a nearby rooftop. She was a demon unlike any Naruto had seen before, with wild red hair tied in pigtails and a maniacal grin on her face. She wielded a massive wicked-looking axe that she swung with terrifying glee. "Y'all are a feisty bunch, ain't ya?" she yelled, her accent thick and drawling. She moved like a force of nature, her axe cleaving through shadow and flesh with equal ease. She wasn't elegant like Verosika or coldly efficient like Stolla's enforcers. She was pure unadulterated violence, and she seemed to be having the time of her life. Her sudden arrival broke the enforcers' formation. Naruto, seeing an opening, pushed through his exhaustion and channeled his chakra into one final, massive burst. Rasengan. The sphere of pure, whirling energy formed in his palm, brighter and more powerful than ever before. He slammed it into the center of the group, and the resulting explosion sent the remaining enforcers scattering into the night. Silence descended on the courtyard, broken only by the heavy breathing of the three survivors. The red-haired demon wiped her axe clean on her sleeve and turned to Naruto, her grin still firmly in place. "Well, butter my butt and call me a biscuit, you sure know how to throw a party. The name's Millie. And you," she said, pointing her axe at him, "you're that feller everyone's been yapping about. The golden demon with the loud mouth. Had to see it for myself." Naruto stared at her, utterly bewildered. "You saved us." "Saved? Nah," she said with a dismissive wave. "Just wanted in on a good scrap. Stolla's boys are always so stuffy. You, though? You look like you know how to have fun." She looked him up and down, her eyes gleaming. "We should do this again sometime." And with that, she sauntered off into the darkness, whistling a cheerful tune. Jiraiya put a hand on Naruto's shoulder, his expression serious for once. Jiraiya waited until the last echo of Millie's whistling had faded into the dark before he spoke, which told Naruto that whatever came next was going to be the kind of thing you needed silence around. The air in the courtyard, once thick with the coppery scent of demon blood, had gone stale. The bodies of the defeated enforcers had already begun to dissolve into black ash, a common fate for lesser demons killed with enough force. It left the space feeling unnervingly empty. Jiraiya began, his voice low and stripped of its usual playful lilt, "We need to talk about what just happened. And I don't mean the fight." Naruto, still buzzing with the adrenaline and the sheer baffling joy of the fight, turned to his mentor. "What's there to talk about? We won. Sort of. Thanks to Millie." He still couldn't quite wrap his head around the tiny, cheerful ball of destruction. She'd fought them alongside him like it was a barn dance. Jiraiya shook his head. "It's not about the fight. It's about what you did during it. That last technique. The Rasengan. It wasn't just a big punch, Naruto. It was a perfect, stable sphere of high-density chakra. That's not something a low-caste demon just does. That's something that should be impossible for you." Naruto frowned, the high from the fight starting to ebb, replaced by a familiar knot of confusion in his gut. "What are you saying? You've been teaching me this stuff." "I've been teaching you to channel a spark," Jiraiya corrected, his gaze intense. "What you just did was start a wildfire. Your power. It's not just waking up. It's accelerating. The stunt you pulled in the Colosseum was a shout. That Rasengan was a declaration. Every powerful demon in this city felt it. They felt the birth of a new star on their doorstep, and they are all, right now, deciding whether to nurture it or snuff it out." The weight of Jiraiya's words settled on Naruto's shoulders like a physical burden. He thought of Verosika's predatory smile, of Octavia's cold warning, of Stolla's fury. They weren't just random encounters anymore. They were reactions. He was a pebble dropped in a pond, and the ripples were reaching the very edges. "So what do I do?" he asked, his voice quieter than he intended. Jiraiya's serious expression cracked, replaced by a wry, almost sad smile. "You keep going. You get stronger. Because the moment you show weakness, the moment you hesitate, they will descend upon you. This isn't a game anymore, Naruto. Welcome to the big leagues." He clapped Naruto on the shoulder, the gesture meant to be comforting, but it only felt like he was being braced for a storm. "Now, let's get out of here before someone sends round 2. The days that followed were a strange, tense mix of heightened alert and surreal normalcy. They moved constantly, never staying in one place for more than a night. Naruto trained with a new ferocity, the Rasengan no longer a fluke, but a goal he chased relentlessly, his hands often raw and bleeding from the force of the chakra he was trying to contain. Kurama was a constant, sarcastic presence, his criticisms now tinged with a grudging respect. He no longer just called Naruto an idiot. He called him an idiot who was slowly getting the hang of things. It was during one of their brief rests, hidden in the rafters of an abandoned observatory on the outskirts of the city, that the second unexpected visitor arrived. Naruto was alone, staring up at the artificial stars painted on the domed ceiling, lost in thought. He heard a soft rustle and was on his feet in an instant, a Rasengan already forming in his palm. "Easy," came a familiar cold voice. Octavia stepped out of the shadows, her hands raised to show she was unarmed. She looked different out of her formal dress, in a simple dark cloak. She looked younger. "What do you want?" Naruto demanded, not letting his guard down. "Come to finish what your dad's goons couldn't?" "No," she said, her purple eyes meeting his with a directness that was disarming. "I came to see you. To understand." She moved closer, and he let her, intrigued despite himself. "I've been in my father's library," she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "I read the forbidden texts. The ones about the bloodlines." She stopped a few feet away, her gaze searching his face. "You're not just a demon with strong chakra. You're a singularity. The last of a line that was supposed to be extinct. A bloodline that doesn't ascend through power, but through will." Naruto felt a jolt go through him. For the first time, someone wasn't just seeing the power or the trouble. They were seeing him. Or at least, the history behind him. "So, what does that mean?" "It means you're dangerous," she said, but there was no malice in her voice. Only a strange academic curiosity. "It means the path you're on. It's not one anyone can follow. It's yours alone." She hesitated, then reached into her cloak and pulled out a small, smooth black stone. "This is a wayfinder. It won't lead you to safety. But it will lead you to your next step. Use it when you're ready." She placed it on the floor between them and stepped back. "Don't get killed, Uzumaki. I find you irritatingly interesting." And then, as silently as she arrived, she was gone. Naruto stared at the black stone, then up at the painted stars. His life had been a series of reactions. To the bullies in the pits, to Jiraiya's training, to the arrogance of the upper rings. But for the first time, he felt like he was looking at a choice. A path. He picked up the stone. It was cold, but it felt like it was humming with a faint energy. He found Jiraiya outside, looking at the real stars. "Hey, pervy sage," Naruto called out, his voice firm. "I think it's time we stop running." Jiraiya turned, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Oh? And what do you propose we do instead?" Naruto clenched the wayfinder in his fist, the cold stone warming against his skin. He looked towards the heart of the city, the spires of bone and glass piercing the red sky. The scroll arrived before he could finish the thought, dropping out of the blood-red sky and landing at his feet with a sound like a coffin lid closing, sealed in black wax stamped with a sigil that made Jiraiya go very, very still. The summons from the Council of Overlords wasn't a request. It was a law of physics. Naruto had no choice but to answer. He didn't feel scared as they made the journey, or at least, not in the way he was used to. There was no fear of pain or death. This was something older and heavier. The council chamber was carved from the living stone of Hell's foundation, vast enough that the 7 thrones looked less like seats of power and more like distant mountains. The overlords were terrifying not because they were monstrous, but because they weren't. They were calm, ancient, and their power was a quiet, suffocating pressure that made Naruto's bones ache. They didn't waste time with threats or speeches. They told him what he was, what his blood meant, and what his options were. He could bend the knee to one of them, become a weapon in their arsenal. Or he could walk the only other path available to a being of his lineage. The trial of Dominion. It was a fight, of course. But not just a fight. It was a crucible. A series of tasks and battles designed to test not just his strength, but his will, his spirit, his very right to exist as a power. If he succeeded, he wouldn't just be an overlord. He would be the first new one in millennia. He would have a throne. Naruto's answer was immediate. "I'll take the trial." The overlords didn't seem surprised. They set a date. And then he was free to go. He walked out of the chamber feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The path was clear. The chaos had a purpose. And as he stepped out into the pulsing light of the Overlord's district, he saw her. Verasika Mayday was leaning against a pillar, looking for all the world like she had just been waiting for him to finish his business meeting. She pushed off the pillar and walked towards him, her hip swaying, her smile a perfect practiced curve of her lips. "So," she purred, stopping just in front of him. "I hear the council has a new pet project. You're going to play their little game, golden boy." There was a challenge in her eyes, a test. Naruto met her gaze, his blue eyes steady. "It's not their game. It's mine." For a split second, her perfect mask slipped. The performance dropped and he saw something genuine in her eyes, something that looked like respect and maybe even a little fear. "Good," she said, her voice losing its melodic lilt and becoming something raw and real. "I'd hate to get attached to a loser." She reached out, not with seduction, but with a simple firm hand on his chest. "Don't you dare die, Naruto. It would be so disappointing." She turned and walked away, her entourage appearing from the shadows to fall in step behind her, the performance snapping back into place as if it had never been gone. Naruto was left alone in the grand hallway, the weight of the coming trial settling on his shoulders. He looked down at the wayfinder in his hand. He thought of Luna's scowl, Millie's wild grin, Jiraiya's quiet pride. He had started this journey alone, an outcast with no name and no future. Now, the whole of hell was watching, waiting to see if he would burn out or become a star. He clenched his fist around the stone, the golden energy of his chakra flaring faintly around his knuckles. The trial was set. The path was chosen. Let them watch. He was just getting started. The weeks leading to the trial were unlike anything Naruto had ever experienced. The constant low-grade fear of being hunted was replaced by a purposeful electric tension. Hell itself seemed to be holding its breath. He and Jiraiya didn't hide anymore. They prepared. They found a small, fortified fortress on the edge of a jagged chasm, a place with high walls and a clear view of the Ashen Plains. It was there, under a sky that weaved a constant, sickly green aurora, that the training intensified to a level that bordered on the insane. "Do you think the overlords are going to send you out there to have a polite little spar?" Jiraiya would shout, dodging a barrage of Naruto's shadow clones. "They want to see if you can break. They want to see if you can be broken." He'd counter with his own techniques, summoning toads from a different dimension, massive warty creatures that belched fire or created impenetrable walls of sticky mucus. Naruto learned to fight on uneven terrain, against multiple opponents, while exhausted, starving, and bleeding. The Rasengan, once his ultimate technique, became his standard opening move. He learned to create it one-handed, to maintain it while moving, to shrink it down to a pinpoint of devastating force. 3 days before the trial, Naruto's Rasengan was leaving craters in the chasm wall, and Jiraiya had stopped pulling his punches entirely, which Naruto chose to interpret as a compliment. On the second to last night, he was sitting on the fortress wall, watching the embers of a distant firestorm drift across the sky, when a small, fast-moving figure appeared on the horizon. It was Millie, her axe strapped to her back, a cheerful spring in her step as she approached the front gate. "Hoy there, golden boy," she called out, her voice carrying in the still night air. "Heard you've got a big date. Thought I'd come by and make sure you weren't getting soft." Naruto leaped down to meet her, a grin splitting his face. Soft. I'm about to go fight for my life against the most powerful demons in hell. What part of that sounds soft to you? The part where you're sitting around looking all pensive. She shot back, her axe already in her hands. Less thinking, more swinging. Come on, one last round for old time's sake. Their sparring match was a blur of motion and laughter. Millie was a whirlwind, her fighting style a chaotic mix of brutal efficiency and unpredictable flair. She fought with a joy that was utterly infectious. For the first time, Naruto wasn't just fighting an enemy. He was dancing with a partner. When they finally collapsed, breathless and laughing, on the dusty ground, she looked at him with a genuine, warm smile. "You're gonna do just fine, Naruto," she said, panting. "You go out there and you show him what happens when you mess with a real demon. I'll be in the stands, cheering you on. Louder than anyone, you betcha." The night before the trial was silent. Jiraiya had given him his space, disappearing to meditate or, more likely, to find a quiet place to write his research. Naruto found himself walking the battlements alone, the Wayfinder stone warm in his hand. It was then that he heard the soft scuff of a boot on stone behind him. He turned, and there was Luna. She was leaning against the wall, her white fur almost glowing in the pale light of the moon. She didn't say anything, just looked at him, her red eyes unreadable in the darkness. He walked over and stood next to her, mirroring her posture against the wall. For a long time, the only sound was the faint whistle of the wind through the crenellations. "You're going to die tomorrow," she said finally, her voice flat. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. "Maybe," Naruto agreed, looking out at the endless dark landscape. "But I'm not planning on it." "You should be," she muttered, but there was no bite to it. "This isn't a back alley brawl or a coliseum stunt. This is the real thing. They're going to try and erase you." He turned his head to look at her. "And what do you think? Think I can do it?" She finally met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw something other than boredom or irritation in her eyes. It was a storm of emotions, fear, anger, and something else, something he didn't have a name for, but that made his heart beat a little faster. "I think you're the most stubborn, loud-mouthed, irritating demon I've ever met," she said softly. "And if anyone is dumb enough to spit in the faces of the overlords and walk away, it's probably you." It was the closest thing to a confession of faith he'd ever heard from her. He wanted to say something, to break the strange fragile moment, but he found he couldn't. So he just nodded, a small genuine smile touching his lips. "Thanks, Luna." She grunted in response and pushed off the wall, but before she left, she paused. "Don't make me regret this, Uzumaki." And then she was gone, a white ghost disappearing into the night. The morning of the trial dawned cold and clear. Naruto stood at the fortress gates, his simple tunic replaced by a set of light flexible armor Jiraiya had procured. It was functional, not ornate. The sage stood before him, his expression uncharacteristically solemn. "All right, kid," Jiraiya said, his voice low. "I've taught you everything I can. The rest is up to you. Remember what I told you. An overlord isn't just about power. It's about will. About what you're willing to fight for and what you're willing to protect. Find your reason and you'll never lose." Naruto nodded, his throat tight. He looked at the fortress, at the chasm, at the sky. He thought of Virasaka's fierce pride, Millie's wild support, Luna's quiet faith, and Jiraiya's unwavering guidance. He thought of the life he'd built from nothing, the name he'd forged for himself. The Overlord was already in the arena when Naruto arrived, standing at the far end of it like a piece of the landscape vast and ancient and completely terrifyingly still. The air in the arena was different. Thicker, quieter, as though all the noise and chaos of hell had been sucked out to make room for something more absolute. The challenger stepped onto the battlefield alone. There were no cheers, no boos, just a hushed, expectant silence. And as he walked toward his opponent, the sun broke over the horizon, bathing the arena in a harsh, unforgiving light. The battle for the fate of Hell's newest power was about to begin. The first attack came without warning. The Overlord, a being of shifting smoke and obsidian, didn't move a muscle. The ground beneath Naruto simply erupted, pillars of black stone spearing upwards like the teeth of some colossal beast. Naruto barely dodged, the air whistling past his ear as he rolled to his feet. The crowd, a sea of silent glowing eyes in the stands, watched with an unnerving stillness. Naruto launched himself forward, a Rasengan already whirling in his palm. He closed the distance in a blur, aiming for the center of the Overlord's smoky form. The attack passed right through him. The smoke reformed behind Naruto, and a hand of solid stone crashed down on his back, sending him slamming into the arena floor with a force that cracked the stone. "That all you have, little spark?" The Overlord's voice boomed, seeming to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't arrogant, just disappointed. "The council was wrong. You're just a loud noise." Naruto pushed himself up, spitting blood. He was fast, but his opponent wasn't even on the same plane of existence. He needed a new strategy. He formed the hand signs. Shadow clone jutsu. Dozens of Narutos burst into existence, charging from all directions. This time, the Overlord reacted. With a sweep of his arm, a wave of pure crushing force emanated from him, disintegrating the clones before they could get close. It was a display of effortless, overwhelming power. The fight became a brutal pattern. Naruto would attack, using every technique Jiraiya had taught him, the Rasengan, his chakra-infused strikes, even attempts at Genjutsu. The Overlord would counter, not with a matching technique, but by simply altering the very fabric of the arena around him. The floor would become quicksand, the air would turn to poison gas, gravity would reverse. Naruto was fighting not just an opponent, but the world itself. He was battered, bleeding, and running on pure fumes. From the stands, Millie was on her feet, her usual cheer replaced by a tense, silent snarl. Verosika watched, her nails digging into the velvet of her private box, her face a mask of conflicted pride and fear. Luna's hands were clenched into fists so tight her claws drew blood from her palms, her red eyes fixed on the lone figure in the arena, refusing to look away, even as he was thrown to the ground again and again. He was on his knees, his vision swimming, the Overlord towering over him. The dark being was raising a hand to deliver the final blow, a sphere of annihilating black energy forming in his palm. "This is over, child. You do not belong here." But Naruto wasn't looking at the Overlord. He was looking at his own hands, planted in the dirt. He thought of the Ashfall District, of the demons who had spat on him. He thought of Jiraiya's faith. He thought of Millie's wild laugh, Verosika's challenging smirk, Octavia's curious gaze. And he thought of Luna, her quiet words of belief in the dead of night. They had seen him. Not just the power, not just the trouble, but him. He wasn't just fighting to win a throne. He was fighting to prove them right. He was fighting for the right to exist, loudly and defiantly, on his own terms. A low growl rumbled in his throat. It wasn't a sound of defiance, but of awakening. The golden red aura around him exploded outward, no longer a crackle but a roaring inferno. The whisker marks on his cheeks darkened, spreading like branching rivers of black ink across his skin. The very air in the arena trembled. The Overlord paused, his attack faltering for the first time. The look in his smoky eyes was no longer disappointment, but a flicker of something new, something like fear. Naruto stood up. He was no longer just fast. He was a blur of golden light. He moved, not towards the Overlord, but past him, his hand outstretched. He wasn't trying to hit the being's body. He was aiming for the core of his essence, the point where his power was anchored to this plane. The Overlord tried to shift, to become smoke, but Naruto was moving faster than thought itself. Rasengan. The attack connected. It wasn't a physical impact. The impact wasn't loud, it was the opposite of loud, a silence that swallowed the arena whole, as the Overlord's essence fractured around Naruto's fist like black glass catching light for the first and last time. The crowd watched, frozen. And then, with a sound like a mountain exhaling, the Overlord's power broke. The smoke didn't just fade, it unraveled, slowly, like a tapestry pulled thread by thread, dissolving into a fine ash that was caught and scattered by a wind that hadn't been there a moment before. For a long, impossible moment, the arena was still. Naruto stood alone in the center, his chest heaving, the golden light around him flickering like a dying star. Then, a single voice pierced the silence. It was Millie, screaming his name at the top of her lungs, a cheer of pure, unadulterated triumph. It was the spark that lit the bonfire. The crowd erupted, a deafening roar that shook the very foundations of hell. The 7 thrones on the dais were empty, but their power was present, a palpable wave of acknowledgement that washed over the arena. The trial was over. A new Overlord had been crowned. Jiraiya watched from the shadows of the archway, a rare, genuine smile on his face. He didn't rush forward. He had taught the boy everything he could. The rest was Naruto's story to write. With a quiet nod of pride, the old sage turned and disappeared into the chaos, his work complete. One by one, the other Overlords materialized in their thrones, their expressions unreadable. But they did not contest the result. They had witnessed the will of a new power, and they had no choice but to accept it. The first to speak was a towering figure of living magma, his voice a deep rumbling groan. The trial is past. The throne is claimed. Let all who dwell in darkness know the name of the new master of this domain. He gestured a massive burning hand towards Naruto, who was still standing in the center of the arena, bathed in the adoration of the crowd and the harsh judgment of the new day. The formal declaration came, echoing across the rings of hell, spoken not just by one, but by the collective will of the remaining 6. Hear us, denizens of the underworld. By right of combat and force of will, Naruto Uzumaki has proven his dominion. Henceforth, he shall be known as the Overlord of the Ashen Reach. All debts to the old master are void. All oaths are now sworn to him. The Ashen Reach. It was a vast, chaotic and notoriously difficult territory to control, a perfect reflection of its new ruler. As the echoes of the proclamation faded, Naruto finally looked up from his hands, his blue eyes blazing with a newfound regal fire. He was no longer just a pit scavenger or a loud-mouthed troublemaker. He was an Overlord. The fight was over, but his true reign was just beginning. And as he looked out at the screaming crowd, his gaze found 3 faces in particular. The ecstatic hellhound, the watchful succubus, and the lone, white-furred figure who, for the first time, was looking at him without a hint of a scowl. The future was a wide, terrifying, and exhilarating frontier, and he was ready to conquer it. The Ashen Reach was a throne in name only. In reality, it was a collection of constantly warring factions, smoldering ruins, and lawless frontiers. For the first few weeks, Naruto's reign was less about ruling and more about surviving the constant stream of challengers who wanted to test the new overlord. He didn't sit on a throne. He was rarely in his newly acquired fortress. He was out in the dirt, his golden aura a beacon of trouble, meeting every would-be usurper head-on. Word spread quickly. Challenging the new overlord was a quick way to get a Rasengan to the face. The challenges dwindled, replaced by a wary, simmering respect. It was during the clearing of a particularly nasty nest of grotesque multi-limbed beasts that he found his first official lieutenant. He was in the thick of it, a whirlwind of golden energy, when a battle cry he recognized echoed across the canyon. "Yahoo! Thought you could use a little help, boss." Millie landed in the fray, her axe singing through the air, cleaving through the creatures with joyous, brutal efficiency. She fought her way to his side, a manic grin plastered on her face. "What are you doing here?" he yelled over the carnage. "Joinin' up," she shouted back, beheading a creature that had lunged at his back. "You got a territory now. A territory needs an enforcer. And I'm the best damn enforcer in the 9 rings." She didn't wait for an answer. She didn't need one. By the time the last creature fell, she was already mapping out patrol routes and talking about fortifying the outposts. Naruto just laughed, a deep, genuine sound. Millie had already started reorganizing his fortress by the time Naruto had caught his breath, which he decided was either a sign of terrifying efficiency or the fact that she had been planning this for a while. Either way, he wasn't going to complain. Arasaka's arrival was the complete opposite. There were no formal declarations, no public displays. One evening, as Naruto was staring at a map of his new domain, trying to figure out which border was most likely to collapse first, he felt a familiar, intoxicating presence behind him. He turned to find Verasaka standing in the doorway of his war room, alone. Her entourage, her performance, her entire persona was gone. She was just her. "The reports were true," she said, her voice soft, stripped of its seductive melody. "You actually did it. The fool from the Colosseum is now a king." She stepped into the room, her movements hesitant, a vulnerability in her eyes he had never seen before. "I've spent my life building an empire of illusion, Naruto. Of temporary power and fleeting adoration. I thought that was all there was." She stopped in front of him, looking up at him with an honesty that was more disarming than any of her powers. "But you built something real. Out of nothing but sheer stubborn will. And I find," she hesitated, searching for the word, "that I admired. More than I've ever admired anything." The end.